A man survives a shooting. Weeks later, police arrest him, not as a witness, not as a victim, as a suspect, in the murder of the woman who was shot right beside him. That's the case out of Monroe, Georgia, a 22-year-old college student, 7 months pregnant, 2 days from her 23rd birthday, killed in the early morning hours of January 25th. Police moved fast. They had a suspect in custody within 48 hours. Case closed, or so it seemed. Except the man lying in the hospital bed next to her, the one who'd also taken a bullet that night, wasn't just a second victim. According to police, Curdarius Williams was one of the 2 people responsible for what happened to Teonia Stokes. Her name was Teonia Beyonce Stokes, and this is what we know, and what nobody has explained yet. Teonia Stokes was 3 months from a college graduation her family had been waiting years to see. She was a senior at Kennesaw State University, majoring in elementary education, not a hobby major, not a placeholder. She wanted to be a teacher, and she was already good at the coursework that gets you there. She'd made the dean's list. She'd made the president's list. Not once. Multiple semesters, back to back. The kind of academic record that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because someone shows up, does the work, and keeps showing up. She was also, by the account of the people who loved her, exactly who you'd hope a future elementary school teacher would be. She was full of hope. She was full of life. She was full of promise. Her aunt, Cal Durham, said afterward, and all she wanted on this earth was to be loved. That's not a line written for a headline. That's a family trying to explain, in real time, what the world just lost. Because Teonia wasn't just building a career, she was 7 months into building a family. She was pregnant with a baby boy, a son she and the people around her had been counting down to meet. Baby showers get planned around due dates like that. Names get picked out. Nurseries get painted. Somewhere in Georgia, there was almost certainly a car seat already sitting in a box, waiting. None of that happened. On January 25, 2026, 2 days before her 23rd birthday, Teonia Stokes was shot and killed in Monroe, Georgia. Her unborn son died with her, 2 days. That's the distance between the life she was living and the birthday she never reached. Somewhere, there was probably already a plan for that day. A cake, a call, a happy birthday text queued up to send. Instead, her family spent that week making funeral arrangements. Here's what's publicly known about the early morning of January 25th. Teonia Stokes was shot in Monroe, Georgia, in the company of a man named Curdarius Williams. Williams was also shot. He survived and was taken to the hospital. Monroe police moved quickly. Within 2 days, they had identified and arrested a suspect, Dorius Brooks. On the surface, this looked like a fast resolution to a horrific crime. A shooter identified, a victim, and a survivor. A case that would move toward trial. But here's the detail that doesn't fit the simple version of this story. Curdarius Williams, the man who was shot alongside Teonia, the man who spent time in a hospital bed recovering from his own gunshot wound, was never cleared. He was released from the hospital, and police were watching. Now here's the part people overlook. Less than a month after the shooting, on February 20th, Monroe police announced a second arrest. Not a witness, not a person of interest. A second defendant, Curdarius Williams himself, charged in connection with the same death he had appeared, at first glance, to have narrowly survived. The man shot beside Teonia Stokes is now charged with killing her. According to Monroe police, Teonia's death resulted from the actions of both Williams and Brooks. Both men have been charged with felony murder and feticide, a charge that treats the loss of her unborn son as its own count, its own life, its own crime. Both also face weapons charges, possession of a weapon by a convicted felon, and possession of a weapon during the commission of a felony. That detail alone tells you something. At least one of these men was legally barred from having a firearm at all, well before that January morning. Brooks faces additional charges: aggravated assault, aggravated battery, and reckless conduct. Here's where this case is still, deliberately, incomplete. Investigators have not publicly explained how, or even if, Teonia knew either of these 2 men. There's no confirmed motive on the record. There's no detailed account yet of what happened in the moments before shots were fired, whether Williams was a target himself, or whether the story he initially told from that hospital bed lines up with what evidence later showed. That gap matters. A young, pregnant college student, days from her birthday, ends up in the middle of a shooting involving two men, one of whom is hit himself. The physical geography of that night, who was standing where, who fired first, whether Williams was truly caught in crossfire or was, as prosecutors now allege, a participant, is the entire unresolved center of this case. What we do know is this: Williams was shot. Williams was hospitalized. Williams was released, and only after his release, after prosecutors presumably had time to build a case beyond the surface picture of second victim, was he taken into custody. That timeline, on its own, tells you investigators found something in the space between victim and suspect, substantial enough to charge him with murder. Neither man's plea has been made public as of this reporting. Neither man has appeared to have publicly disputed the charges through an attorney on record. There's a specific kind of disorientation built into this case, and it's worth sitting with instead of rushing past. Most true crime cases give you a clean binary early on. Here is the victim, here is the person who hurt them. This case denied investigators, and now denies the public, that clean line for weeks. A man who bled from the same violence Teonia did was, for a period of time, publicly positioned as someone who had survived what she didn't. That's not just an investigative twist. It's a real complication in how a community grieves. Do you send Williams a card in the hospital? Do you treat him as someone who nearly died alongside her? For nearly a month, some people in Monroe likely did, before learning that police believed he had a hand in her death. To be clear about what we don't know, being shot in the same incident as someone who is murdered does not, on its own, prove guilt. People are sometimes shot by co-conspirators turning on each other. People are sometimes shot accidentally in chaotic, fast-moving violence. The presence of a gunshot wound is not evidence of premeditation. It's Monroe Police's broader case, still not fully public, that led to Williams' arrest as a second defendant. What this case leaves unresolved, for now, is motive, the single most human question in any homicide. Why was Teonia Stokes there? Why two men? Why her? Those answers may come out at trial, in preliminary hearings, in the discovery process. As of today, they have not come out publicly at all. We opened with a question: how does a man who survives a shooting end up charged with the murder of the woman shot beside him? Right now, the honest answer is, we don't fully know. Monroe Police say the evidence supports it. The court process will decide whether that evidence holds. What isn't in question is who was lost. Teonia Beyonce Stokes was 3 months from a college graduation she worked years for. She was going to stand in front of a classroom of children and be the kind of teacher who makes the dean's list sound inevitable in hindsight. She was 7 months into carrying a son. She was 2 days from turning 23. Her aunt said all Teonia ever wanted was to be loved. Whatever the courts eventually decide about Dorius Brooks and Cerdarius Williams, that part of her story isn't up for debate. She was loved. And on January 25, 2026, that was taken from everyone who loved her, along with a little boy who never got the chance to be held. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe a survivor of the same shooting can also be its architect? And what do you think investigators found that moved Cerdarius Williams from hospital bed to defendant?